Welcome to episode 2 of Teach with Mr. Hawkins. Now normally we're going to be doing books from my teaching collection of books that I've used over the years, but this episode is about my 2-year-old's favorite book. It's a board book. A board book is thickly printed. Usually they have one word on each page, maybe a picture. However, this one's a bit strange because it's actually about a grade 1 or 2 reading level story that they've decided to publish in this form. And it's called Go Train Go, featuring Thomas the Tank Engine. In this story, Thomas the Train has to take the judge to the train show, and they encounter delays, which if you're familiar with the Thomas the Tank Engine world, delays are one of the worst things that can happen. And it's of course aimed at younger children, but you can do a lot more with it than just that. So let's talk about your usual kind of follow-up questions you might use with a story like this with just about any age, but these questions will sound more like the younger audience kind of questions. Why did the judge lose her hat? Now that's a good question because it doesn't actually tell you why on the page where the judge loses the hat. But you can look at the illustration and get a clue, and you can think about, well, what's the train doing and why would the hat fly away? It's called making an inference. It's a good reading skill to develop. What character trait does the judge show, or what character traits does the judge show? And then explain. So if you're going to say that the judge is bossy, how is the judge bossy? If you're going to say that the judge is kind, where's your proof in the story, or how do you know? Do trains really stop for cows? That happens in the story, but some of you will know that there was a part of a train called a cow catcher. You may or may not want your child researching that. Would you read this book to your child, why or why not? That's a good question to ask a child. So if you're 10 years old and your teacher says, well, when you're older, would you read this to your child? Or would you read this to your brother or sister in kindergarten? It helps them recognize audience and purpose of a book and what's appropriate and or interesting. So you get different answers there. My little brother's totally into trains. He would love to read this book. My sister isn't interested in books with blue characters. So on, so on. You get strange answers, interesting answers if you ask questions like that. Say you want your student or child at home or at school to do some research. Thomas the Tank Engine, the extended world of that, is fantastic for that because it's built on references. The 1980s TV show was all these, well, much fancier than this models, and they're based on real trains and real things, mostly in England. But there's a rabid fan base that has researched all of this stuff up, and there is tons of information and connections and things to find on the internet that you can go down this rabbit hole if you really want to. If you're working with older students that are past the I'm really interested in trains and then cute stories stage, you could still use Thomas the Tank Engine because it's become a pop culture piece. For example, you can ask the question, is Thomas the Tank Engine a pop culture icon? Yes or no? And then an older student could make research and make their case for why. You can look at things like the Ant-Man movie where Thomas the Tank Engine has a scene. You could look up that scene, it's probably on YouTube or something, and you can ask, why would the rights holders to Thomas the Tank Engine allow that scene to be used? That's one question. Alternatively, you could ask, why would the filmmakers want to use Thomas the Tank Engine in that scene? So there's these pretty wide open, interesting questions you can ask based on Thomas. If you want to really dig into it, you can look at the Thomas the Tank Engine started as a series of books written by the Reverend W. Awdry that was adapted into the TV show in the 1980s with all the fancy models. And by the 2000s, it was all done with computer-generated animation. So you kind of have 3 eras of these stories as they age through. So you can ask some questions comparing those eras and looking at them. One of the questions could be, how is diversity represented in the different ages of Thomas the Tank Engine stories? Who's missing? Who's represented, who's not represented? You can look at the characterization of characters. For example, there's an engine named Emily and there's an engine named Diesel, and their characters go through arcs that are very different. The character in one season, one episode is quite different than in others. Well, why did the show writers do that? Why did they change the character? Thomas the Tank Engine has other important things you can ask about it. For example, would there be a Pixar movie Cars if not for Thomas the Tank Engine? if you can change the characters in Thomas the Tank Engine to animals, what animal would best match or represent? In the songs that are on the videos of Thomas the Tank Engine, they say that Thomas is the cheeky one. What animal represents the character trait of cheeky? That's open to interpretation. So something to be careful with Thomas the Tank Engine is you can go down into the video game mods arena. You can go into that. And Thomas the Tank Engine actually has appeared in quite a few video game mods that gamers have done for rather popular games. Some of those games might be too violent or inappropriate for your audience, so you need to preview that ahead of time. But if you have a teenager that's going, oh, Thomas the Tank Engine, this might be the hook that gets them into it. And why would these gamers that could spend, if they're able to program something into a mod for their game, they could do anything. And some of them are choosing Thomas the Tank Engine. Why? So yeah, that's a lot of possibilities from a 2-year-old's favorite board book. And obviously, being a Thomas book helps. Other board books maybe wouldn't be so useful. But the idea is, what have you got in your home? Like right now, most of us are staying at home. Well, what do you have in your house that you can apply questions like the examples I've given in this video to the things that you have on hand? Thanks for watching. Please subscribe. Again, that's the feedback that helps us be encouraged to keep making these videos. And thanks for watching.